Now, today's character from the New Testament is Lazarus. Now, unlike many of the others we've looked at, he's not an apostle, but a friend of Jesus Christ. How do we know that? Well, Jesus stayed at his home. And when he received the news of his illness, we know that he wept when he heard of his death. Now, that account is found for us in John chapter 11. It's a very long passage that concentrates but on this one incident, and one incident more than any other incident actually in John's Gospel. It's connected to one of those great statements, the great I am statements. I am the resurrection and the life. And the wider section is an important section. So I'm going to read to you just two verses from John 11, 43 and 44. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Now, the miracle is narrated modestly, and it's Jesus' words to which Lazarus responds. The position in John's Gospel is important to note. It's the last event prior to the Passion journey. It precedes the plot to kill Jesus. And it deals with one of the most challenging of all issues, death itself. But it's also important because it serves, I think, as a transition into the final part of the Gospel. When Jesus declares himself to be the resurrection and life, it gives us a lens through which we can understand all things. And this account of the bringing to life of Lazarus mustn't be confused with the resurrection of Jesus, because clearly Lazarus died. It's not a case of Lazarus is coming out of this grave and he'll never die again, but he brings him to life. He brings him to life, and in doing so points to something more profound, the deeper sense of God's presence in life. And I like it for many reasons. I like the fact that Jesus is moved at the death of a friend. I mean, this thought of Jesus wept is such a powerful thought, really. It tells us so much about the humanity of Jesus. It tells us something of the way in which he reached out to people in their personal lives, to Lazarus, to Mary, to Martha, and to their home. It also gives us, I think, an insight into his response. Now, I think at first people were a bit disconnected by the fact that he didn't come immediately. He didn't immediately turn up at the door. But the truth is, he had confidence. He had confidence in his friend. He had confidence in his own ability through the Father to raise him to life. And I think for all of us, it gives us some insight into the identity of Jesus with people in need, whoever and wherever that need is. When I study the New Testament and I look at the way Jesus' healing ministry is exercised and his compassionate ministry, there's an indiscriminate sense in which God reaches out to people of all kinds, to people on the parameters, to people rejected by others, to people whose physical ability is in some way not able to be lived to the full, to people whose emotional ability is maybe not to the full. In every sense, Jesus reaches out and touches and heals. But on this point, it's his words when he says, "Come out," that become the important part. And when Jesus says his resurrection and life, that still has a lot to say to us. Resurrection and life is not only about life, whereby life goes on forever. It's about quality. It's about depth. When Jesus says his resurrection and life, he brings the best out of people. He brings life in all its fullness. In the chapter before, in chapter 10, we know that Jesus said, "I have come that people might have life and have it to the fullest." I pray that you might find something of the new life, the strength and the healing grace of Christ. May you know today that Jesus Christ is resurrection and life. And like Lazarus, you might come out of whatever tomb it is that you live in, which may not be, of course, be a death tomb, but it may be the need for liberation, the need for being released, the need to be free, the need to be able to understand that you can live life also to the full. So God calls us through this character of the New Testament, not an apostle, not a disciple, but certainly a follower with a very special close relationship with Jesus Christ. And we pray that somehow we might not only learn from him, but we might discover the strength that there is in following one who calls us to new life in Jesus.